Hello, everyone. Could you type in the chat, can you hear and see us? Yes, great. Okay. Let's wait a little, 1 or 2 minutes for more users. I hope the topic for the rules is enough interesting for everyone. Because it's important. Yeah. You can type some questions in the chat if you want before starting. We have some ideas and topics into the Facebook group written. So I think the two presentations focus on that. Hello, Katalin. Okay, I think we can start and you if someone comes, you start from the. So, hello everyone. The topic today is rules and with with the key of changes in the new rule book, dates in the rules 14, 17, and 18. For waiting and smart room, I think info for the difference between matrix and matrix. Just a second to give you again the advertise for the matrix, which we will organize here in Varna. At the beginning, the date it's 17 and 80 of May, and the registrations are open. So all the teams who want to participate are welcome to sign up the form. I will put the link for the where you can find the forms into the chat. So yeah, so we had some very interesting races. So I hope this year will be even better. Let's continue with Stevie and with the topic for the rules. Stevie.
So good afternoon, Yasin. Good afternoon, everyone. So as Yasin said, tomorrow we will be discussing about rules, and in particular the racing rules of sailing. So the rules are a huge topic. So we couldn't cover everything in 1 hour. So we decided to point out and to focus on the rule changes for this next 4 years, and then to discuss a little bit about differences in match racing and fleet racing, or umpired fleet racing, and some particular kind of races. I will invite you to put your questions in writing if you want to ask something about rules, and we will try to answer as many questions as possible. So let me share my presentation. I hope everyone can see the screen that I'm sharing. So as I said, today we will be navigating the racing rules. We will try to make a quick introduction about rules, because I said before the topic is huge. So what we are going to do, first of all, is to understand some fundamentals about the rules. First of all, what is a rule and how the rules are made. Then we will discuss about the important rule changes in the new Racing Rules of Sailing 2025-2028. And then we will discuss the most significant difference between match race and fleet race rules. And we will cover some other rules like Appendix UF, which is used in umpired fleet racing, class rules, and notice of race and sailing instructions, before answering your questions, if there are any, at the end of this session. So first of all, what is a rule? The term is defined in the Racing Rules of Sailing in the book, and actually it includes the rules in the Racing Rules of Sailing book, including all appendices and race signals and everything. It includes world sailing regulations that have designated with the status of a rule. These are some specific regulations made by world sailing. For example, like the anti-doping code, the advertising code, the eligibility code, code of ethics, that they have been given a status of a rule by the, let's say, the governing body of our sport, which is world sailing. These regulations, they are not included in the Racing Rules of Sailing. And the reason for that is that they can change at any moment during these 4 years, contrary to the rules that usually they don't change during these 4 years, unless there is something exceptional and something very urgent. Also, the prescriptions of a national authority are rules. What are the prescriptions? The prescriptions are, let's say, some changes in the rules made by each national federation. So some rules are allowed to be changed by the national federations, and in order to comply with I don't know, local regulation or local laws, the federation are changing some rules to do that. Also, the class rules are rules. So the class rules depends on the class that you are sailing in. And for example, in 420 class, they have specific class rules. The Fin class has specific class rules. The ORC has specific class rules, and all the One Design classes, they have specific class rules. Also, the notice of race and the sailing instructions are rules. And usually in the notice of race, I think we already said that in the previous sessions, the previous weeks, the notice of race include information about the event, which will determine and will make a boat decide whether to participate or not. And the sailing instructions, they include all kind of information about how the races will be run. And finally, any other document that governs the event is a rule. These are stated in the sailing instructions or in the notice of race. And all those documents, they have the status of the rule. That means that you can break a rule in all of them, and you can be penalized if you break any rule in any of those documents. So the rules are made every 4 years. Well, they are made. The rules are there and they are changed every 4 years. And this is done in order to prepare at the end of, so it's done at the end of the Olympic Games. Let's say the next year after the end of the Olympic Games, and they last until the next Olympic Games. So actually the rules is the contract how the next Olympic Games will be run. The rules have changed during the years through submissions. So each federation or each class or each international race official can send ideas or proposals to World Sailing in order to change the rules. And World Sailing every year during the annual meeting, they are considering and they are discussing these submissions and they are deciding whether to approve them or not. After collecting all the submissions through these 4 years, they are writing and they are inputting these changes in the rule book and they are publishing the new rule book. So now we will have a new rule book that started in 1st of January of 2025, and it will end on the 31st of December on 2028. So this year, there were many rules changes. Most of them, they were about cosmetics. So that means in order to correct things that were written wrongly, things that were not understood properly, and also rearranging rules and rearranging rules numbers in order to comply with how the new rule book is made. But some of the changes were slightly different. So we have a new part that was completely rewritten from scratch, and this is the part about hearings, protest, request for redress, and how all the hearings are held. And we have some major changes to some of the racing rules of sailing. We decided to point out the most important ones that they are changing the game. And this is about Rule 14, which is about contact, Rule 17, which is the rule about the proper course, and Rule 18, which is the rule that applies at marks. So we will go a little bit through them in order to see what has changed in this new book. So what I did is I put in confrontation the old rule and the new rule. So Rule 14, it used to be only about avoiding contact, but from now on it's also about not causing contact. So the rule makers they want boats to avoid and not causing contact as much as possible. So they are trying to write the rule in order to make people as cautious as possible on the water. So now the rule requires not only to avoid direct contact, but also not to cause one, either between boats or between boats and objects that should be avoided, which are marks, race committee vessels, islands, or other objects that they can be described in the sailing instruction. So that means that from now on, a boat can break this rule even without having direct contact. So let's see some examples. First of all, I will tell you how this rule change started. So this started like 8 years ago. There was an incident in the Princesa Sofia Regatta, which is one of the biggest events worldwide. And the incident was pretty much what I'm describing here. So 2 boats were approaching the windward mark and they entered the zone overlap, and a port boat was crossing in front of them. So one of the starboard boats could not pass the mark, and he had to shoot in order to round the mark. So he started shooting the mark. The other boat responded and caused contact with a green boat that was on port, causing serious damage. And the problem is that with the previous rules, no boat was able to be penalized. So there was a big discussion about this. They started implementing the rule in high-speed classes like the Sail GP, America's Cup, and all those very fast boats. And then they found out that it's working pretty nice. So they decided to implement this change also for fleet racing. And it's the same also for umpired fleet racing, also for match racing and all disciplines. So this rule change will be implemented in all disciplines from well, it's already been implemented since the rules apply from the 1st of January. So in this case, with the new rules, the blue boat will be penalized because it's the one that indirectly caused contact between yellow and green. Another example is when two port boats are passing behind the starboard boat. Well, when the leeward boat, when blue boat is not giving enough room between herself and the yellow boat and cause contact between green and yellow, then blue will be penalized for causing contact. Or again, at the race committee vessel. So if the blue boat closed the gap very late between herself and the race committee vessel and does not give enough room to yellow to enter there, then blue will be breaking rule 14 because he caused contact between yellow and an object that shall be avoided. Remember here that the fact that yellow, when approaching the line to start, is not entitled to enter there, does not give the right to blue to cause contact. So these are two different rules. The fact that yellow may be breaking another rule doesn't necessarily mean that blue can do whatever she wants. And finally, something similar applies also to marks. So if blue doesn't give enough mark room to yellow and causes him to crash onto the mark, then blue will be breaking rule 14 because she caused contact between yellow and the mark. So you see now that there are a lot of examples where you don't need to have direct contact between boats. You may have no contact at all, and you still you may be still be breaking rule 14. At this point, I just want to point out that we don't know yet how word sailing will interpret the word cause. So usually for rules that are pretty much or a little bit complicated, word sailing is publishing a, let's say, a supplemental book to the rule book, which is called the case book. And in there, this book includes official interpretations of the rules. Unfortunately, this book is not ready yet. So we are waiting from word sailing to see and understand what cause contact will mean. So we need to be patient in order to understand fully what word sailing want to implement exactly with this rule change. So we talked before that a boat shall not cause contact between a boat and an object that shall be avoided. So one of the objects that shall be avoided in the racing area are marks. And what is a mark? This term is also defined in the racing rules of sailing. And according to the definition, a mark is an object that the sailing instruction require a boat to leave on a specified side, a race committee vessel surrounded by navigable waters from which the starting or the finishing line extend, and an object intentionally attached to the object or vessel. However, an anchor line is not part of the mark. So, are there any marks that I cannot touch? So, when a boat is not racing, a boat cannot be penalizing for touching a mark, except if causes serious damage. So actually, when we are not racing, we can touch a mark. But if we cause serious damage, for example, at the race committee vessel, then we can be penalized. But while racing, we shall not touch a starting mark, a mark that begins, bounds, or ends the leg that we are sailing in, and the finishing mark. Windsurfers, on the contrary, because windsurfing has a different appendix, and they run races through under a different appendix, they can touch a mark, but they cannot hold onto it. So looking at some examples, let's say a dinghy moored at the race committee vessel is an object intentionally attached to the mark, so it's part of the mark. So if I touch that dinghy, I will be penalized for touching a mark. If I touch only the mooring line of the pin end boat, but without touching the rib, then I didn't break any rule because the anchor line is not part of the mark. So I didn't touch any mark. Therefore, I don't have to do any penalty turns. The same goes, for example, to a branch that accidentally was attached onto a buoy. So while a boat was rounding the mark, touched only the branch of the wooden branch, but not the mark. And then, therefore, this branch is not part of the mark, and therefore the boat is not penalized. So this was the, let's say, one of the biggest changes of this new rule book that was about avoiding and not causing contact. The second big change in the rule book is about the rule that is talking about the proper course. And this rule is Rule 17. So structurally, what changed in the rule is that from the previous rule, the last sentence was deleted. So that means that from now on, if an overlap begins while the windward boat is tacking, then this rule will apply, and that means that the leeward boat is not allowed to sail above her proper course, unless by doing so, she passes astern of the other boat. We will go through some examples, but first of all, I want to clarify what is tacking. So a boat is tacking from the moment she passes head to wind until she is on the new close hold. And this is totally unrelated. So the new close hold is totally unrelated to trimming of the sails or something similar. It's only about the angle to the wind and nothing else. So putting the change into two scenarios, the difference between the scenario on the left and the one on the right is that in the scenario on the left, blue boat has already passed head to wind. So the overlap began after, so while blue is tacking, after blue passed head to wind, and therefore yellow is not allowed to sail above her proper course. In the scenario on the right, blue has not passed yet to wind, so the overlap began before blue passed head to wind, and therefore Rule 17 will not apply, and yellow can sail above her proper course. So this is the change in the rule for this rule book. I know that it will be very difficult to understand when a boat has passed head to wind, or whether a boat has passed head to wind or not. But well, this is what the rule says, so we need to comply with that. In order for Rule 17 to apply, we need to have 5 requirements, and all of them, they need to be applied at the same time. So first of all, we need to have a boat clear astern that becomes overlap to leeward of another boat within a distance of 2 of her hull lengths, and while the 2 boats are on the same tack. The last requirement is that the starting signal has been given, and this is because before the starting signal, there is no proper course. So if one of the requirements is not met, then Rule 17 does not apply, except requirement number 5. So requirement number 5 is just a trigger to the rule. That means that if all other requirements have been met before the starting signal, so the rule starts to apply just after the starting signal has been given and not before. But it doesn't make the rule not applicable. So what we said just now, to put it in an image, so we must have a boat that is clear astern, yellow in position 1, for example, is clear astern of blue. And then if yellow establishes an overlap to leeward on the same tack and within 2 hull lengths from blue, then Rule 17 will apply, and yellow will not be allowed to sail above her proper course unless if by doing so she passes astern of blue. For whatever other kind of overlap is established, then Rule 17 does not apply. So for example, if yellow establishes an overlap to windward of blue from clear astern and on the same tack and within 2 hull lengths, Rule 17 will not apply because the requirement that the overlap shall be established to leeward is not fulfilled. The same goes if after a boat, in this case yellow, establish the overlap to leeward and on the same tack and within 2 hull lengths. So after position 2, in practice, if blue jibes onto starboard and then jibes back onto port, then Rule 17 will stop to apply because the new overlap after the jibe will not be fulfilling all the requirements. So it will not be established from clear astern and to leeward. Or another case is if yellow was further away beyond the distance of 2 hull lengths and was sailing on a converging course with blue. And after a while, established an overlap while the distance was bigger than 2 hull lengths. And after a while, converging, they came very close together. So again, Rule 17 will not apply because the requirement of the overlap being established within 2 hull lengths was not fulfilled. So I think it's pretty clear that how all the requirements need to be met in order for Rule 17 to apply. But what exactly is the proper course for a boat? Because this is a concept that is actually very, very difficult to understand and very difficult to apply and very subjective also. So the proper course is the course that a boat would choose in order to sail the course as quickly as possible in the absence of other boats referred to in the rule using the term. And the boat has no proper course before her starting signal. We said that before. So we see here that the proper course is something that the boat would choose, and actually there are a lot of factors that contribute to that choice. So, for example, current is a factor, wind, speed, or gust is a factor. wind shadows or dirty air is a factor. What kind of boat you are sailing is a factor. For example, if we have an SB20 and a boat with a Jenaker in general, and a boat with a symmetrical spinnaker, for sure, downwind they will have different proper courses because of the mechanics of the boat. So this is a very difficult concept to understand, and it's not easy. It's not easy to prove if your proper course or if you sailed above your proper course, because there are a lot of factors to be taken into consideration. Fortunately, for disciplines like match racing, this rule is completely deleted. So they are very lucky, these guys, because they don't have to apply this rule. And in umpired fleet racing, you will have umpires behind the boat that they will be them to decide whether a boat sailed up of the proper course or not. Unfortunately, for normal fleet racing, if you have a protest or on the water, it's up to the boats to prove that they are sailing above their proper course or not. Remember, however, that there is no rule in the book or in any of the rules that require a boat to sail, not to sail below the proper course. So this was a change about Rule 17 that that was a rule that was already very complicated. In my opinion, it became more complicated with this change. But well, it's still early with the new rule books. Let's see during these 4 years how this will be applied and if it will create any problems. And finally, let's talk about maybe the biggest change in this rule book. It's about Rule 18. Rule 18 is the rule that applies at marks. So part of the rule was rewritten in order to make it more clear for boats. Like, for example, the preamble to Section C that actually says when the rules of Section C do not apply. Now it is made clear, so actually it's pretty much the same. Now only the part in red were added, and it is made clear that this rule applies at starting marks surrounded by navigable waters or obstructions surrounded by navigable waters. And this preamble apply from the time the boats are approaching the line to start and until they have left the mark or the obstruction astern. So this rule is not very, very big because it says pretty much the same thing as the previous rule. And then we have the rule around marks, which was rewritten completely. But if we look very carefully at the rule, we will see that this rewrite was not a substantial change, but it was a reordering of the rule. So if we want to go very quickly through it, the old 18(2)b now is the basic rule. So it's what applies mostly at the marks. And to be honest, this was a normal change because the old 18(2)b was actually what was happening in 95% of the cases, and it was not the first rule. So now they decided to put it as the first rule. There is also another change in this rule. So in the old rule, 2021 to 2024, we had boats overlapped when first of them reached the zone. And then we have either the outside boat at that moment or if the boat was clear ahead when she reached the zone. From now on, when the first of two boats reach the zone, what is important is if the boats are overlapped, then the outside boat shall give mark room. But if the boats are not overlapped, the boat that has not reached the zone yet shall give mark room. So now what is important is the relation between the boats the moment the first of them reach the zone and nothing else. If we continue with this rule, we see that 18-2A, that used to be the basic rule up to last year, now it moved further down, and this is again normal because this was happening only 5% of the, and even less maybe, of the cases. Then we have 18-2D that was reordered and renumbered as 18-2B. 18-2F that was reordered and renumbered as 18-2D. 18-2E remained completely unchanged. And 18-2C, that was a completely stupid and useless rule, is deleted. So, as I said before, if you look carefully through the rule, the change is not that big. It's just a simple rewrite of the rule to make things more clear. So to put in a design what I said before about the basic rule, what is important now is when the first boat reaches the zone, if the boats are overlapped, then the outside boat shall give mark room. So in this case, if the mark is to be left to port, then the outside boat is the blue boat, and she shall give mark room to yellow. If the mark is to be left to starboard, then in that case, blue boat, even though she's not yet inside the zone, is the inside boat, and yellow has to give mark room to blue. On the other hand, if the boats are not overlapped, when the first of them reaches the zone, the one that has not reached the zone shall give mark room. So let's see some more examples about Rule 18, because there are some small details that we need to be very careful about. So if two boats are approaching a windward mark on opposite tacks, then there is no Rule 18 at all. It's as if the mark was not there. We only have port and starboard. And this is because Rule 18.2.1a says that Rule 18 does not apply between two boats on opposite tacks on a beat to windward. And this is exactly the case. On the second case, we have two boats approaching a windward mark, and when blue entered the zone, she was not overlapped with yellow. So the fact that yellow established an overlap later on inside the zone is completely irrelevant. What is important is the relation of the boats the moment the first of them reaches the zone. And in this case, since they are not overlapped, the boat that has not reached the zone shall give mark room to the other. So blue is entitled to mark room throughout the maneuver. In the third case, again, blue is the one that reached the zone first, and she is not overlapped with yellow. So that means that yellow is not entitled to any mark room, and she cannot enter where she is trying to enter. So she cannot enter in between blue and the mark. She shall give mark room to blue to round the mark. And on the last case, the bottom right one, is the same as before, but in this case, blue and yellow are overlapped when the first of them reach the zone. So that means that the inside boat, the outside boat shall give mark room to the inside boat. Therefore, blue shall give mark room to yellow to round the mark. But what exactly is mark room? Because we are talking about mark room, and mark room is, let's say, a pretty complicated concept. So mark room is also one of the definitions that have been changed in this rule book, but not in a significant way. So actually, it's pretty much the same as before, but it put an order to what you have to do. So mark room first is room for a boat to sail to the mark. And when the proper course of the boat is sailed close to the mark, then it's only that room to sail close to the mark. Then is room to round or pass the mark as required. And the third one is room to leave it astern. So as soon as all those three requirements are fulfilled, then mark room is done and is over. And that means that Rule 18 stops to apply. The biggest change in this rule book, because I said that Rule 18 for me is the biggest change in this rule book, is Rule 18.3. So Rule 18.3 was talking about boats that was tacking from port to starboard inside the zone of a mark to be left to port. As I said before, also talking about Rule 14 about contact, the rules, they want boats to sail safely. So we don't want boats to approaching the windward mark on port tack and try to squeeze in between other boats that are sailing on starboard. So rules are trying to make things difficult for all those port tackers that are trying to approach marks on port tack. So actually, what has been changed, and it's very significant to be honest, is the first sentence that has been added to the rule. So part of the rule is completely unchanged, but now it has been added an extra step. So if a boat passes head to wind from port to starboard tack inside the zone of a mark to be left to port, then Rule 18 does not apply between her and another boat on starboard tack that is fetching the mark. So that means that anytime a boat tacks in the zone from port to starboard tack and is inside another boat on starboard tack that is fetching the mark, she is not entitled to mark room under Rule 18.2. So I want to clarify two things, because this is a common misconception about Rule 18 and the other rules. The fact that you are entering inside the zone and you are entitled to mark room doesn't give you any right of way. Only 4 rules are giving right of way to boats, and this is port starboard, windward leeward, clear ahead, clear astern, and a boat that is not tacking respect to a boat that is tacking. Mark room is only giving, let's say, a right to the boat that is entitled to mark room in order to pass the mark, and nothing else. So when the rule says that the boat is not entitled to mark room, that means that all the other rules apply normally between the boats. So port starboard, tacking, windward leeward, clear ahead, clear astern, etc. So let's see some example about this new rule. So in the first scenario, we have blue that passed head to wind inside the zone, but yellow was sailing, let's say, above the ley line to the mark and not on a close hold course. And when they met at the mark, yellow did not, so yellow laughed, but did not have to sail above close hold to avoid contact, but just had to alter course. So in this case, rule 18.3 is not broken, but rule 13 is broken because the yellow boat had to take avoiding action in order to avoid the boat while tacking. In the scenario in the middle, blue passed head to wind inside the zone. Yellow that entered the zone on starboard tack had to sail above close hold to avoid contact. Then in this case, rule 18.3 is broken. And the same already applied also in the old rules. And in the third scenario, the one on the right, blue passed head to wind inside the zone and yellow became overlapped inside blue. So in this case, blue has to give mark room to yellow. So rule 18.3 apply. Now it's called 18.3b. And to be honest, those three cases actually, applied also in the previous rules. What has changed is the following. So the following scenarios is the one that have changed. So in the first scenario, blue passed head to wind in the zone, inside the zone, from port to starboard, just after yellow. So we said in this case, rule 18 does not apply between the boats. So what apply is normal rules. So if blue, while tacking, can keep clear from yellow, then it's fine. And in position 3, blue is leeward and yellow is windward. So yellow has to keep clear of blue. So it's actually as if the mark was not there at all. In the second case, we have the yellow passing head to wind just after blue. Again, in this situation, rule 18.2 does not apply between the boats. And yellow in position 2 has to keep clear yellow has to keep clear of blue because she's tacking. And in position 3, yellow has to keep clear of blue because yellow is windward of blue. And in the third case, both yellow and blue passed head to wind inside the zone from port to starboard at the same time. Again, also in this case, rule 18.2 does not apply between them, so nobody is entitled to mark room. And what applies between them are normal rules. So in position 2, we have two boats that are tacking at the same time. So the one that is to the left of the other has to keep clear. And in position 3, we have two boats on the same tack overlapped. And yellow to windward has to keep clear of blue to leeward. So remember that in order to comply with this new rule, this new change, remember that if both boats pass head to wind inside the zone, then most probably rule 18.2 will not apply. Not most probably, most certainly rule 18.2 will not apply between them. Nobody will be entitled to mark room, and normal rules will apply. So that means that you need to be very, very comfortable and very, you need to study very well the rules of section A and section B, which is the rules that apply mostly and give, well, the rules of section A, they give the right of way, and rules of section B, they give some limitations to the boats. But if you remember that the fact that you are inside of the other boat and close to the mark does not mean that you are entitled to mark room, then you will be safe with this new rule change. So these were the biggest changes in the new rules. there are, as I said in the beginning, there are many rules that have changed, mostly cosmetically, but still, I think it's a good idea for all of you, since this is the first year that these rules are in application, to go through the rule book at least one time carefully in order to understand what has been changed. Also, if you want to bypass reading all the book, which I strongly, I'm totally against, there are a lot of spreadsheets on the web that you can find the most important changes and what is the meaning of them. Another big change that happened is part 5, which is the part about protests and request hearing, has been rewritten from scratch. I will not go through that change in this session because it's a very big rewrite. But to summarize what has happened, actually almost nothing changed. So the whole rule was rewritten mostly because they wanted to put in order the procedures to follow, what to do, and to make them by type of request, contrary to what was before, that was chronologically. So the difference and the changes are minor and are not so important. But still, it's a good idea to at least go once through them. So we said that we're also going to discuss some differences between Appendix C. Appendix C is the appendix that applies in match racing and the normal fleet racing rules. So match racing is a special discipline, and which is held between only two boats. And well, it's mostly about the show. So rules needs to reflect that we need the show most of all. So a lot of rule changes are about this concept. So the biggest rule changes, and I will only limit the rule changes in let's say the important changes that affects racing, and not what is affecting scoring or what is affecting race committees or umpires' decisions, is first of all the zone. The zone in normal fleet racing is 3 hull lengths of the boat nearer to the mark. Instead, the zone in match racing is 2 hull lengths of the boat nearer to the mark. Usually in match racing, we have the same type of boats, so the hull lengths will be equal between the two boats, which is not always the case in fleet racing, because we can have boats of different types and different lengths racing together. There is a new rule in match racing that it's called the last point of certainty. Well, this rule is, let's say, is about competitors, but mostly is about umpires. This rule says that if umpires are not sure that the relation between boats has changed, then the boats have still the previous relation. So to make it simple, if the umpires are not sure that an overlap was established, then the boats are still clear ahead and clear astern. And on the other hand, if the umpires are not sure that an overlap was broken, then the boats are still overlapped. So this helps the umpires in order to make decisions, because in a lot of incidents things are happening so fast. So it's good to have a last point of certainty in order to go back to the last condition that was certain for the umpires. There is a rule similar to tacking that applies also for jibing boats in match racing. This rule does not exist in fleet racing at all. So what this rule says that a boat is jibing from the moment the boom passes the center of the boat until the sail is filled on the new side, on the new side, or until the boat is not sailing anymore downwind. And throughout that time, a boat has to keep clear of another boat that is not jibing. So pretty similar to the rule that applies in fleet racing while tacking, which I need to mention here that also applies in match racing. We have a new rule about jibing. This is because usually in match racing boats are very, very close together. So we don't want boats just to pass the boom from one side to the other and have immediately the rights of a starboard boat or lose the rights if they are jibing from starboard to port. So we want an amount of time that the boats needs to keep clear in order to make boats maneuvering a little bit further away one from the other. The next important rule in match racing, well, this is a new rule for this rule book actually, or to say it in a better way, this was used to be a match race call. The calls are similar to the case book that we mentioned before for fleet racing. Match racing has match race calls. So the calls are various incidents that are being explained in order which rules are applicable. And these calls are official interpretations of the rules. So previously there was a call. Now is a rule. And actually what this rule says is that you cannot hunt another boat below 90 degrees. So if a boat on port is approaching a boat on starboard and the boat on port starts to bear away to pass behind the boat on starboard, then the boat on starboard cannot start hunting down or cannot hunt the other boat by going below 90 degrees if the other boat will have to make another maneuver in order to continue to keep clear. And finally, another big change in match racing, and this is mostly because we want the show and we want the boats to be able to sail very far away from the mark. We deleted rule 17 is deleted. So this rule is not applicable. So at all times, a boat can sail above her proper course, provided that she complies with the other rules. So if she's changing course, she has to give room to the other boat to keep clear. If she acquired the right of way, she has to give room to the other boat to keep clear. Or if the boat jibes from port to starboard, then the port boat has to keep clear. So apart from match racing, these were the biggest rule changes in Appendix C. There are other smaller changes. So, for example, now we can disqualify a boat that has retired from a race. We don't need to wait from the other boat to finish, because up to last year, if a boat retired from a race, we needed to wait for the other boat to sail the course and finish. But because match racing is a discipline that we need to move forward and we need to sail as much as we can, well, we decided now that if a boat retired from the race, we can display her the black flag, and then the match will be over, and the other boat does not have to sail the course and finish. So this rule changes was mostly made in order to gain time. And then there are various other small changes in scoring or small things, which I will not go through them here. I think whoever is involved with match racing has to study Appendix C. Well, rules are very important in match racing. So we need to study rules because it's part of rules are part of our tactics. Finally, there are similarly to Appendix C, there is a similar appendix for umpired fleet racing, which is very common and very trendy, actually in all over the world. So umpired fleet races are run under Appendix UF. Appendix UF is just another appendix with a difference that it's not inside the book, or at least not yet. But it's an appendix that you can download from World Sailing website. So this appendix has a set of rules and a set of changes in the rules, which is a combination between fleet racing and match racing. So they took things from both disciplines and they are applying them into fleet racing. So Jasen is asking if Appendix UF is new. No, Appendix UF is there for at least 8 years. Now we are still waiting from World Sailing the new Appendix UF in order to comply with the new numbers of the rules. So Appendix UF has some choices, and organizers, they can choose through those choices which rules will apply to their event. But they cannot do any more changes to the rules. So the only changes to Appendix UF are the ones that are proposed by Appendix UF. The biggest, let's say, difference between fleet racing, match racing, and Appendix UF is that in Appendix UF, the possibility of redress, except for giving help, is denied. So there is no chance of getting redress if the race committee screwed up, if the race committee made a mistake, or if you had an incident and somebody caused physical damage or injury. There is no possibility for redress. And this is because, again, those kind of disciplines, umpired fleet racing, match racing, team racing, and other disciplines are there mostly for the show. What is the difference between a call and a rule? So I said that before. Calls are not rules. So calls are, let's say, special cases that have actually happened at some point, and umpires or judges were unable, or they found very interesting. So they send the incident to World Sailing, to a group of experts, in order to asking them which rules apply and how they should decide that incident. So World Sailing, those experts were answering, applying the rules. And that answer is the official interpretation of the rule. But it's not a rule itself. So the difference between a call is the answer given. A call is the answer given by those experts. A rule is whatever is defined in the rule book. So as we said in the beginning, the rules in the racing rules of sailing, the class rules, the prescriptions, the regulations having the status of rule, notice of race and sailing instructions, and other documents governing an event. And also another question, if I can give some example for rule 13.2 for match racing. Well, some examples. So first of all, this rule apply when we are sailing downwind because we have to jibe. When a boat, let's say, jibes from port to starboard, the moment the boom crosses the center of the boat, then this rule starts to apply. And from that moment until the sail is filled, that boat shall keep clear of other boats. So that means that while within that time, that period of time, if the other boat has to take avoiding action in order not to hit the boat that is jibing, then the boat that is jibing broke rule 13.2. That's why I don't know if you have ever seen any match racing videos or if you have done any match racing. You will see a lot of crews when they are jibing. When they are finishing the jibe, they don't leave the sail to fill by itself, but they are giving a sudden pull at the main seat on the main seat in order to convince the umpires that the sail is filled a little bit earlier. So, as I said in the beginning, rules are so many. There are so many rules, and rules are complicated. Believe me, sometimes they are so complicated that not even judges or umpires agree between them about how the rules are being applied in an incident. And that's why, and I think this is also part of our sport, you can see very different decisions based on the same incident or what is apparently the same incident, because in my opinion, every incident has some small details that makes them different from another incident. Especially in situation like the one in the picture that you can see a mark rounding or a gate rounding of a 420 class, you see that it's pretty easy to create a big mess since a lot of boats are coming in together at the same time. So if you don't know your rights and your obligation, believe me, it's pretty easy to create a mess and lose many points. I think that rules are important not only to avoid the protests. I think protest is the least or should be the least of our concern during a race. Rules are important in order to use them in our advantage during the race. It's useless trying to use them in our advantage after the race, meaning trying to disqualify a boat through a protest. Of course, there will be times that this should be done as well, but mainly we should use them in our advantage while we are racing. So the better we know the rules, I think the better we can understand what are our rights and what are our obligations. And we can, let's say, we can build our tactics around those rights and obligations, and especially in very crowded places. Because, to be honest, this is where you are going to need rules. So that's it about rules. I think what we did was an introduction to the biggest changes of this new rule book. And to be honest, well, there are some important changes, so I think it's a good idea to study them a little bit before going racing. And I think this is the best opportunity because there is still some time before the racing season starts. I don't know if there are any questions or you want something specifically to be answered. I will stop sharing the presentation. So we have a question at the leeward mark. What is the amount of the room that the outside boats should give to the inside? Could the inside pretend for room for tactical rounding, or the outside is allowed to squeeze her close to the mark? So the room, as I said, mark room is defined as the room a boat needs to sail close to the mark, to round the mark or pass the mark on the required side, and room to leave the mark astern. So there is a lot of misconception about tactical roundings. And to be honest, 2 terms ago, so in 2017 or before 2017, the tactical rounding was allowed, especially if the boat that was entitled to mark room was also the right-of-way boat, but not anymore. So actually, from 2017 on, the inside boat is only entitled to room to sail close to the mark. I want to point out something. There is sailing outside. So mark room is we can imagine mark room as a corridor that allow us to sail close to the mark, to round the mark and leave it astern. So sailing outside of the corridor is not by itself an infringement of any rule. So there is no rule that says that sailing outside of the corridor is breaking a rule. Sailing outside of the corridor, it means that the boat that is entitled to mark room is not anymore protected by a shield of protection, which is if you are sailing within the corridor and you break any rule, then you are exonerated. So if you decide to go outside of the corridor and you break a rule, you will be no longer exonerated for this infringement. But if you don't break any rule, then you are allowed to sail outside of your corridor. So I think that was it from.
Any other questions? Okay, no questions. You can ask them into the Facebook group later when you watch again the presentation. Okay.
They can comment on the presentation, and if there is any question, I will be glad to answer on the group.
Thank you very much, Stevie, for the great explanation of the difference between the old rulebook and the new one. And thank you, everyone, to participating. We will find the records and the presentation to the end of into the Facebook group. And next week, we will discuss together with Rocco and Stevie for some topics about match race and some tactics and strategies. So thank you and have a nice evening to everyone. Bye.
Perfect. Have a nice evening and see you next week. how can we give the
There is some question, I think, from Dilyana.
yes, because there is a raised hand.
You must defer the voice.
Wait, I need to find her. Okay, perfect.
Dilyana, but you are muted.
The question is not from her side, but
Hi. Well, actually, I haven't typed any questions so far. Probably someone else. I just write down my greetings and thanks for this interesting session. And
perfect.
Have a nice evening to everyone.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you too.
Okay, perfect. So
Thank you,
good night, everyone.
Bye.